In the early 19th century, the area named the Great Fork, also known as Sashequacu, which means where we smoke in Abenaki, has been renamed Sherbrooke in honor of the Lieutenant Governor Sir John Cope Sherbrooke. Today it's a pretty quiet student town that sits at the crossroad of the St. Francois River and the Magog River. But every town has its legend and its secret, and today we are taking a trip to the East Canton to discover the secret that may have been laying in Sherbrooke. Ladies and gentlemen, greetings. Today we're sitting in the impressive wildlife of Sherbrooke, Quebec, to discover urban legends that have been laying down here in this old student town.
We do have small stories in our region that are, especially in Sherbrooke, not especially, but some of them in Sherbrooke. I would say that in the general history of Quebec or Canada, well, they're not well known. Even for people here, they do know it, but they have to learn about it. And this is why we've created these murals, so that we could be able to show them as part of these stories.
If you were to follow the St. Francois River to the north, you will most likely come across the Lonely Pine Tree Island. But what is the Lonely Pine Rock?
The Lonely Pine Rock was called in Abenaki Menasen. That's the term given to that rock as is. And there's a few stories about that rock. It's on the main river, and Sherbrooke is created by two rivers. And these two rivers were well used in the First Nation time, or even in the English and French wars. They were used as highways along these banks. But at the beginning, even when only the Abenaki and the Iroquois were here, hunting and running around to find food and shelters and places like this, different places, because they were mostly nomads. And this part of rock was in their legend because of the shape. It has a rounded shape on that river. And it did look like a turtle shell. And the turtle is a symbol for the Abenaki and the Iroquois as the Mother Earth, that we are on that shell. So for them to, when they were passing through the hunts and the quest for food, when they went by that rock, they were given a way of getting good favors from Mother Earth. So they would go around that in canoe 4 times, hoping that they will get a good hunting season or things like that. So that rock became an important symbol for the First Nation.
For the past centuries, this rock has been the center point for almost every urban legend that the town has to offer.
Imagine a very cold winter in 1692, so in February kind of situation. So freezing, record freezing, even though there were no records in that time, but a very hard winter. And the river was frozen. And the Abenaki was coming down on the east shore of that river. Then they were looking on the other side and saw some smoke coming up. And they would say, well, that's not us, so it must be them, the Iroquois. The Abenaki saw the smoke and they kind of went down, the chief went down to see the Iroquois chief and say, you really want to fight in that freezing weather? The parley, like they would say in that time. And they decided to, let's take your best warrior and I'll take mine, and make some sort of competition. And they said they would run around the island on the ice until one falls of exhaustion. So they were running for hours and hours in freezing rain and moccasins and not so well dressed, and until one of them fell down. The story wants us to know that the Abenaki won and the Iroquois fell. So the Iroquois left that territory to the Abenaki.
Pretty interesting, but there's a lot of myths surrounding the rock, and one of them is about war, danger, and love.
Mixed in with facts and romance, and that's the story of the Lonely Pine. Because for a while, there was just on the rock, just one pine that was growing on that rock without soil whatsoever. So during the French and English War, And the story goes that in winter still, which didn't happen so often, the Abenaki made a raid on the American side in Deerfield, Massachusetts. And that was always a big surprise for that village because usually you do not make raids in wintertime. Robert Gardner and Alice Morton, which were supposed to get married the next day after the raid, were captured and brought back here down to the St. Francis River, almost to the St. Lawrence River, the village called Lac Saint-François. Finally, the guy who was a blacksmith, so pretty strong guy, and Alice Morton were brought back to that village of Adenac. And the story goes that they were able to run away. They took a canoe and came back to the St. Francis River, coming back to Sherbrooke at that time, coming back to the Lonely Pine Rock without a pine at that time. The lady was exhausted, no food, no sleeping, and they knew they were pursued by the Abenaki. The lady died, not having time to properly bury her. So he crossed the river and put the lady on the rock. And that time, you can imagine also there was no dam, so the river was way more, a lot of current going down, so way deeper also without the sediments that closed the river down. Then he craned back to the shore, took some grass and branches and things to cover her up on the rock. And after that, he crossed over the river again, not having the tools to make a cross. He decided to take a small pine, plunge it in the heart of our promised wife and that died. From that, they say the virgin, because you were supposed to be a virgin in that time, the pine grew, and that's how the pine became the Lonely Pine.
The pine tree stood there strong for a total of almost 200 years until 1913, where one night the tree just vanished.
Two stories about how the pine has gone away. One is a big storm on the rock and lightning struck it and turned it down. Another, a little bit more folkloric story is that the two guys, late at night, a bit tipsy, decided to go on the island and cut the tree down and sell little slab of the pine, 25 cents, to be able to drink the next day. But the story tells that there were so many little slices of that pine that they would have needed to tear down a forest. So it disappeared.
Through the years, the rock entered into Sherbrooke's folklore and was even honored both by the Société Saint-Jean-Baptiste and the Abenakis.
And like I say, in 1934, for the 400th anniversary of Canada, the Société Saint-Jean-Baptiste has put an iron cross on it. And even in 2002, which was the bicentennial of Sherbrooke, one of the Abenaki chief put a small pine back on that rock, and it's still there, but it's going to take a long time before it becomes a big pine.
Those stories are not the most well-known in Canada's folklore, but they're still represented in those murals for those who want to remember. If you've ever taken a trip 2 hours away from Montreal, 50 kilometers north of the American border, you might have come into a little student town with an impressive wildlife called Sherbrooke. It's not a big tourist bait, it's not really commercial like Montreal or Quebec City, but it has heart. If you're ever in Sherbrooke, stay the night, visit, take pictures, and who knows, you might have a great time, you might find a treasure, you might even be turned into a tree for all we know. But one thing is sure, if you ever stay in Sherbrooke for a while, you will have a great story to tell.